Hey everyone, I hope you had a good Super Bowl Sunday yesterday, whether you watched the game or not. If you ate a bunch of food like I did and you're recovering today, I hope you had a good weekend and are ready to jump in on week 6. So we just got 3 weeks left. You guys are doing great. We're almost through. This week we're talking about the environment. So some really interesting ideas going on, some really cool artists that we're going to look at. We have a cool create assignment this week that, have an open mind about. Before we jump into that, though, let's talk about your reading. So you don't have to read in your textbooks this week. We have an essay, or it's almost like an interview, that we're going to be reading. So if you just visit this website, this is the page that you're going to be on, and it's an essay called Of Other Spaces. Um, it was originally published in the 1960s, so we're kind of going back in time a little bit, even though we're contemporary visual arts and culture. This is really Michel Foucault was one of the great postmodern thinkers, and we may not agree with a lot of what he says, but there's some really interesting ideas in this whole concept of heterotopias, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, what on earth are heterotopias? You're going to find out when you read this. So this is just a little introduction, and don't worry, you're going to think, oh my gosh, this is so long. This is in French, this is in English, so it's going to look like it's a really long paper. It's not, it's just that it's in this narrow column. So go ahead, and as you read this, I've given you a PDF file that I've created that should kind of help you along with these ideas to break them down. So if you have questions about it as you're going through it, I would kind of read it, along with this PDF. So kind of go through each section, and this should help you out. If you are having trouble with this, this is not an easy piece of writing to get through, and that's okay. We're not going to shy away from hard things just because they're hard or maybe a little above us. That's okay. You will get something out of this, even if you get to the end and you email me and say, I understood this one thing in this whole paper. That's fine. But we're going to challenge ourselves a little bit with this. So go ahead and read it alongside with this, and let me know if you're just really struggling with a certain section of it. And I did take out this week, you had a reflection that was a journal entry where you were going to look at a photographer named Stephen Shore and then write about this idea of heterotopias along with it. Because I really want you to focus on your film review and your create assignment this week, I did take out that journal. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that. However, your quiz will have questions about heterotopias, so you do want to make sure that you read this. But just trying to lighten the load a little bit so that you guys can not feeling too overwhelmed here. Okay, so make sure you get that done, and let's jump into this create assignment that you're going to be doing. So we're calling this Andy Goldsworthy Earth Sculptures, and Andy Goldsworthy is the artist that I want you to be looking at. So this assignment is going to give you an opportunity to create your own original earth sculptures in the style of artist Andy Goldsworthy. So this requires you getting out from behind your computer, going outside. You have to be outside for this project, so let's get out in nature and get some fresh air. So kind of a nice breather at this week 6 point. So be sure that you watch this short documentary. It's only about 25 minutes. There's some really great documentaries on Andy Goldsworthy. I think there's one called Rivers and Streams that's much longer, but I wanted just to give you an idea of his work and what it looks like. Also, if you just Google Andy Goldsworthy and go to images, you'll see a lot of his work, because you're going to want to get as much inspiration as you can and look at as much of his work as you can to get an idea of what it is he does. Andy Goldsworthy uses all natural materials. He uses nothing else. And so he's a really cool guy. He lives up in the Scottish Highlands, and real interesting character. So this is what you're going to be doing, using only natural materials. These can be leaves in your backyard, branches in the park, seashells on the beach, whatever they might be. You're going to use creative problem solving to complete 3 earth sculptures to photograph and submit. So I've given some examples here below, but then of course if you go to the Google page and search, you'll have a lot of examples to look at, and then in the documentary as well. So I'm trying to get you to really engross yourself in his work. So after finishing the sculptures, you're going to photograph them and then post your images in a blog entry. This assignment is done as a blog, so I encourage you to look at your peers' work. And then you're going to answer the following questions about your experience making these sculptures. So number one, describe the experience of making them. Number two, what was the most challenging part of creating these? Sometimes students say, I thought it was going to be really easy, and then once I got out there, just deciding what to do was really difficult, or how to creatively put these materials together. And that leads to question number three, has doing this project changed the way you think about artists like Andy Goldsworthy? I'll get students who say, no, I thought he was a brilliant artist to begin with once I looked at his work and watched the film. Others say I didn't really get it that much, but once I had this tactile approach and seeing how challenging this work is, it really makes me respect artists like him a lot more. So just really consider what your opinion is before and after doing this project. Number four, if you could describe each sculpture with one word, what would it be? So if you had to title it, for example, and why would you title it that? Number five, are there any biblical scriptures you can think of that would pair well with the images of your sculptures? We're tying in that, Christian perspective here, and, getting out in the natural world, which is all created by God anyway, right? So could we kind of use these as visual examples of scripture? So kind of an interesting perspective you might want to go into this project with. And number six, has this experience changed you in any way? Why or why not? Maybe you think no. It was easy and I enjoyed it, and it didn't change the way I feel about these kind of artists. Or maybe yes, it really made me respect earth artists a lot more, or opened up my eyes a little bit to the natural world. So just be really thoughtful with these answers. Don't just give a quick cop out. I'm just looking 2 to 4 sentences in length for each of these. Be sure you proofread your work before submitting. So have fun with this. Do know that I mean, I'm not grading you based on the fact that whether or not you're a professional artist or not. You guys, I've made that pretty clear at this point, that I don't expect you to be Andy Goldsworthy. However, I do expect you to do your best, and I expect you to utilize creative problem solving and to go for it. Step outside your comfort zone a bit. Without fail, every time I teach this class, I'll get students who just go out and photograph something in their backyard, and I'm not going to give you credit for that. This assignment really, to be honest, should be easy to get 50 out of 50 points. Just do the work. Do it on your own. You have to manipulate objects. You can't just, set something on the ground and then say, oh, I made a sculpture. You have to manipulate. You have to change things, right? So that's what Goldsworthy always does. You'll never find, I don't want you to just go outside and photograph a tree or photograph a flower bush. I've had students do that before, and I've had to say, you didn't actually do anything here but photograph it. This isn't necessarily a photography assignment, it's sculpture work. So I want you to, I want to see your hands in this project and your process a little bit. So have fun with this. Sometimes students go into this with a bad attitude and think, why am I doing this? This is a college class. Yes, it is a college class, and I want you to start thinking a little bit creatively and outside the box. So go into this with a good attitude and have fun with this project. Enjoy the break from being behind your computer, because you have a film review this week, which I prepped you on last week. This is 6 to 8 pages. This is a critical review. This isn't just a film summary, right? So in that 6 to 8 pages, it's okay to have maybe the first 1 to 2 pages of that 6 to 8 being a summary of the film. But if you give me 3, 4, 5 pages just summarizing the film, and then not a smaller percentage of your paper is actual analysis, that's not going to bode well for you in the grade department. So I've seen all these films. I know what they're about. I know what happens. So just, include what's necessary for you to then analyze, okay, when it comes to summarizing the film. So let's go over these in a little bit more detail. Hopefully you've already chosen a film and watched it and you've read through these, but I'll just give you a little bit more insight on each of these. Sorry, this announcement's a little bit longer this week. So things to think about if you chose The Passion of the Christ. Number one, how does the new media of film affect the delivery of a timeless story, right? This is the story of all stories. It's 2,000 years old, right? And this is a relatively new translation, really, ultimately, or interpretation of this story. So consider things like camera angles, montage scenes, flashbacks. So this is a new medium, film, if you look at the span of history, and it allows us to tell stories in really unique ways. So I want you to consider that and how that maybe, pulls on the emotions of the audience, of how it kind of can tell multiple perspectives in a very short amount of time. So be thinking about this idea. So I want you to give a minimum of 3 examples of this, camera angles, montage scenes, flashbacks, things that are specific to the genre of film. Okay, number 2, what is the theme of the story? So consider rise, climax, and fall of action, because that's what we have in a story, and in a film especially, that's kind of what we have to have. How do these thematic elements influence the audience's perspective? Number 3, how does the idea of authorship, so we have authorship of scripture, and then we have authorship or interpretation of the film by Mel Gibson, right, who's the director, so he's the one, we're seeing this story from his perspective. He's taking some artistic liberties. And so how does this play into the interpretation of scripture? What artistic liberties did Mel Gibson take here? Give at least 3 examples of elements that are found in the film that are not found in scripture, but that help tell the story, right? So number 4, who was the target audience for this film and why? And really think about this. This might require you to do a little bit of reading about the film and, what happened in that moment. So consider all of that. Any questions on that, please let me know. The second choice of film is Food Inc. This is a documentary about the food industry, and these are the things I want you to think about. So number 1, the average supermarket has over 40,000 products actually on their shelves at any given time. However, the majority of those products are made of a very small number of ingredients. So this one, we're really talking about visual culture in this prompt. So I want you to consider the fact that this is an illusion of choice, really, and that the visual is the driving tool behind this illusion. That packaging is what makes us feel like we have all these different choices, even if you're looking at 25 different products that are all made of high fructose corn syrup, for example. They're basically the same thing. We're manipulated through the visual. So I want you to give at least 3 examples from the film that illustrate this idea. Number 2, how do the structures of power in the food industry, and specifically advertising, affect the everyday culture of America? Consider not just what we eat, but the process that goes into making our food, raising livestock, employees, this whole idea of farm to market. And so, again, this really has to do with visual presentation, how this information is delivered to us, and how it has really changed the way that our economy functions. Number 3, how is the visual used as a tool to glorify the food industry? So there's a very good clip at the very, very beginning of the film of a package of butter, and it shows, this beautiful farm with green pastures and these happy cows on the front. And so we tend to have this glorified idea of where our food is coming from, but that may actually not be the truth. So there's some different examples of that throughout the film that I want you to think about. And number 4, consider the icons of the food industry, which they talk a lot about, and how they impact daily life. What moral obligations do the food industry have to their customers? So this is a really interesting prompt, and students tend to really enjoy this film. It's a good one, and it's very relevant today. So again, make sure if you choose this, you're focusing on this idea of visual presentation and how that is the driving force here. Okay, the third choice is Up by Disney Pixar, a wonderful little cartoon, right? Most of you have probably seen. So things to think about here. Number 1, describe how this film illustrates the idea that film is first a visual medium, right? So the visual is the thing that propels storytelling here. And that whole opening sequence past, when they're little children, and there's dialogue there's this long sequence that just has music, and there's no dialogue at all. It's kind of a montage scene. But what makes this such a powerful storytelling device? So I want you to consider that. Number 2, this is where I really want you to dig in here in this second question. What is nostalgia? So don't just give me the dictionary definition of nostalgia. I want you to dig a little bit deeper, do some research here. There's a lot of good research out there on this whole concept. It's a very psychological concept. So, how is this concept of nostalgia present in this film? And why is nostalgia so powerful on the American psyche? Don't forget this part. Often, when students pick this prompt, they give me the dictionary definition of nostalgia, and then they kind of talk about, oh, nostalgia is this, longing for the past, and it's so nice, and, we think about how things were better back then. Uh, but they don't take it any further than that. So, why is nostalgia so powerful on specifically the American psyche? So, think of this whole idea of Americana, the greatest generation, this whole boom in the 1950s that happened that we tend to look back at and really latch on to this kind of world that didn't actually exist. So, there's some really interesting ideas that go on with nostalgia, and I've actually written extensively on it. So, I want you to really kind of dig in here. And if you want help with this, email me and let me know, and I can give you some interesting sources to consider. So, number 3, how is symbolism present in the film? So, be specific. I want you to give at least 3 examples from the film here. And why are these symbols important to the characters? And what is their function in the story? So, we're really breaking down the function or the different parts of storytelling here. And number 4, has to do with Pixar specifically and an element that they use in their storytelling. All Pixar films deviate from reality. So, for example, in Toy Story, we have talking toys, right? In Cars, we have talking cars. These are not things that happen in the real world. And yet, there's never a sense, there's never any actual quote unquote magic. There's never a wave of a wand or a spell, something where, think about with Disney films a lot that there's, a witch or there's a fairy godmother or something magic happens. And yet, these films give the viewer a sense of magic even though there isn't magic. This is something that happens in every single Pixar film. So I want you to talk about how Up does this and how this is kind of a sneaky, clever way of just opening up our imagination. So any questions on those? If you're writing it and you kind of get stuck on a point or not sure if you're going in the right direction, let me know. You have your quiz as well. So that's what we got going on this week. I took out the Reflect Journal, so you don't have to worry about that. So you're going to do your earth sculptures. So hey, maybe get your film review done first and then reward yourself by going outside and creating something, and then get your quiz done as well, and we will be rocking and rolling into the last 2 weeks of class after this. Have a great week, everyone.